There are certain moments in life when a person walks into your world and, almost instantly, the whole idea of coincidence just stops making sense. You can try to trace it all back logically, line up the events, look for the reasonable explanation. But somewhere underneath all that analysis, you already know that logic was never really running the show here. This person didn't just casually wander into your life. They arrived fully, undeniably. And the moment they did, something inside you shifted, quietly but permanently. Even now, even as you try to move forward, even as you tell yourself the chapter is closed, even as you talk yourself through the logic of it all, there's still something pulling your attention back to them. It's not a desperate kind of pull. It's the pull of recognition, the kind that doesn't need convincing. If you're reading this today, it isn't by chance. The messages we need most tend to arrive exactly when we're ready to actually understand them. Carl Jung once wrote that the person who looks outward dreams, while the person who looks inward wakes up. And right now, something deep inside you is starting to stir. It's a kind of knowing that refuses to stay quiet, a feeling insisting that this connection was never meant to be something you simply forget. You might be standing right at that crossroads, feeling split in two, caught between holding on and letting go, caught between trusting what you feel and doubting yourself because of everything you can see on the surface. Silence has a way of feeding doubt. Distance can make even the steadiest heart start questioning its own truth. Maybe you've wondered if you imagined the depth of it all, if you projected meaning onto something that was never really there. But if it had been imagination, it would have faded by now. Illusions don't survive being tested by time. This did. Your soul won't let go of this person, and there's a reason for that. Time didn't weaken it. Pain didn't destroy it. Every attempt you made to walk away somehow circled you right back to the same quiet realization. This person matters, not in the way your ego wants them to, but in the way your soul actually recognizes. This isn't obsession. Obsession is loud, anxious, demanding attention. What you're feeling is quieter than that, and deeper. It lives underneath the noise of everyday thoughts and expectations. It waits patiently. It surfaces in still moments, in dreams, in sudden waves of emotion that show up uninvited. It's the feeling of something unfinished. When you first met this person, something old stirred awake in you. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't simply compatibility on paper. It was a familiarity that had no memory attached to it, a sense that you'd known them somehow before this life ever introduced you properly. The conversation itself might have been simple, but the energy underneath it wasn't. Your nervous system recognized safety and intensity at the exact same time, and that particular combination is rare enough to leave a real mark. Jung compared the meeting of two personalities to the mixing of two chemical substances, saying that if any reaction happens at all, both substances end up transformed. You were transformed, and whether they've admitted it to themselves or not, so were they. Connections that genuinely change us are never casual. They rearrange something inside us. They open doors that don't close again easily. Even now, even across distance, even through silence, they feel you more than they let on. Some people feel things inwardly and show them outwardly. Others do the complete opposite. Silence doesn't mean the absence of feeling. Sometimes it actually means there's too much feeling and nowhere to put it. Your presence woke something in them they weren't prepared to handle. And instead of leaning into it, they stepped back, hoping that distance would quiet whatever you had stirred up. It didn't. Energy doesn't need words to travel. In their quiet moments, when the distractions fall away, you surface in their mind, not because they're trying to think of you, but because the connection insists on it. They replay old conversations. They remember the way you made them feel truly seen. They notice the gap between how alive things felt with you and how flat everything else feels in comparison, and that comparison unsettles them. They're not distant because they don't care. They're distant because they do. There are battles happening inside them that were never yours to fight. Old wounds, a fear of being vulnerable, a fear of losing control, a fear of being seen at a depth they aren't ready to hold yet. For some people, love itself feels unsafe, not because of the other person, but because of what it reveals about themselves. This is exactly where so many connections fracture. One person wakes up faster than the other resists the mirror being held up in front of them. You became that mirror. You reflected back parts of them they'd buried a long time ago, and instead of turning toward you, they retreated from themselves. Jung described this exact pattern when he said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we'll call it fate. Right now, they're being steered by everything they haven't faced yet. But an awakening, once it happens, can't be undone. You can't unsee what you've already seen. You can't unknow what you now know. You walked into their life and reminded them what emotional truth feels like, what tenderness feels like, what authenticity actually looks like up close. You touched a part of them that had been asleep for a long time, and that kind of contact doesn't just vanish, it lingers, it reshapes things quietly. It waits. The universe doesn't waste meaningful encounters. If this connection were meant to end quietly and completely, it already would have. Instead, it keeps echoing in signs that catch your attention, in dreams that feel more vivid than waking life, in moments where their name comes to mind without any effort on your part. None of that is distraction. Those are signals, not telling you to chase anything, but telling you to trust what's already unfolding, mostly beyond your control. There's a real difference between forcing a door open and simply knowing it will open on its own once things align. Your exhaustion here is completely valid. Loving deeply without clarity is genuinely heavy to carry. But your hope isn't weakness, it's intuition. And intuition doesn't scream for attention. It waits quietly. Right now, something is shifting beneath the surface, not visibly yet, but internally. Resistance is loosening. Fear is being challenged. A heart that was once closed off is starting to soften under the weight of its own truth. And whether they say it out loud or not, the thought of losing you completely is starting to scare them more than the thought of actually trying again. This isn't the end of the story. It's the pause before real understanding arrives. The space where growth quietly happens. The silence where alignment gets ready to reveal itself. You're not being asked to wait around blindly. You're being asked to stay rooted in yourself, to remain open without abandoning your own sense of balance. Jung also said that patience is the key to real joy. Not the passive kind of patience, but the grounded kind. The kind that trusts timing without sacrificing self-respect in the process. The kind that knows when something is genuinely real without needing to force anything. As all of this settles into you, notice what resonates without any real effort. Truth doesn't need convincing. It simply lands. And if your heart feels calmer instead of more anxious reading this, that's your confirmation. The connection isn't broken. It's transforming. And in the middle of that transformation, you're being shaped just as much as they are. That's something the analytical mind tends to resist, because the mind wants resolution, wants clean labels, wants a fixed timeline. But the soul doesn't operate that way. The soul uses uncertainty like a refining fire. It strips away illusions, unhealthy dependencies, and false expectations until only the truth is left standing. What you're going through right now isn't just waiting, it's becoming. You might notice that ever since this connection entered your life, you're simply not the same person you were before. Your emotional awareness has deepened, your standards have sharpened. You can no longer settle for shallow connection or half-present love. Something inside you now refuses to accept anything less than what actually feels aligned, safe, and real. That's not a coincidence. That's the imprint left behind by a soul-level encounter. Sometimes a connection doesn't arrive to stay with you right away. Sometimes it arrives first to wake you up, to show you what's actually possible, to reveal what your heart truly needs, instead of what it was conditioned to settle for. And once that kind of awakening happens, you simply can't go back to sleep. Even if the person themselves is absent, the truth they activated in you stays alive. This is exactly why letting go feels so impossible right now, not because you're clinging to a person, but because you're holding on to a truth about yourself that was born through knowing them. You learned how deeply you're capable of feeling, how open your heart can actually be, how capable you are of real emotional presence and devotion. And the soul doesn't abandon its own growth once it's begun. What complicates this connection isn't a lack of feeling. It's a mismatch in timing and readiness. You're ready to open up. They're still working through their own process. And readiness isn't something you can hand someone else. It has to be earned through their own inner confrontation, through facing fears they've avoided for years, through choosing vulnerability over self-protection. There are moments when they almost reach out to you, moments when your name sits right on the edge of their lips, moments when they hold their phone in their hand, mentally rehearsing what they might even say. But fear interrupts every time. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of not being enough, fear of reopening something they're not sure they can handle yet. So they stay quiet, hoping time alone will solve something that actually requires courage. And yet time keeps bringing you right back into their awareness anyway, because unresolved connections don't just disappear. They wait. They linger. They resurface the moment distractions fall away, late at night, early in the morning, in the gaps between empty conversations, in relationships that never quite reach real depth. You become the quiet comparison they can't ignore, no matter how hard they try. You're not being punished by this delay. You're being prepared to receive love without abandoning yourself in the process, prepared to recognize real effort instead of chasing unrealized potential, prepared to meet them not as someone seeking validation, but as someone already standing firmly in her own worth. They feel this shift in you even if they can't quite name it. They sense you pulling your energy back inward, and that's exactly what makes the connection start to feel more real to them, because it's no longer something they can take for granted. This is where fear starts losing its grip, because the possibility of losing you completely becomes a real, tangible thing to them. Memories soften, regret rises to the surface. A genuine desire to repair things starts to grow. That kind of balance is powerful. It signals to the universe that you're ready for the truth, whatever shape it ends up taking, and truth always responds to genuine readiness. As this part of the process continues, you may start to sense it more clearly, not as longing anymore, but as a kind of quiet certainty, a knowing that doesn't beg for reassurance, a trust that doesn't need constant proof or signs to hold on to. Something is genuinely moving toward alignment, not rushed, not forced, but real. There comes a point where the longing softens into understanding, not because the connection itself weakens, but because your relationship to it changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start sensing that this is happening for me instead. That shift feels subtle, but it's actually profound. It's the exact moment pain starts turning into wisdom. You're beginning to see that this connection was never meant to consume you. It was meant to reveal you, to strip away what was false, to expose the places where you had abandoned yourself in the past, to teach you the difference between intensity and real intimacy, between attachment and devotion, between fantasy and truth. And once that lesson starts to settle in, the suffering loosens its grip. You may notice your thoughts about them shifting too. They're no longer frantic or desperate. They arrive gently now, sometimes with warmth, sometimes with clarity, sometimes with a calm acceptance that whatever happens next has to be rooted in authenticity, not fear. That's a sign of real emotional maturity forming inside you. And this is exactly where the connection reaches a turning point. Because when one person in a soul-level bond grows, the entire dynamic is forced to respond somehow. Energy naturally seeks balance. When you stop chasing answers and start embodying them instead, everything around the situation starts to adjust accordingly. What once felt stuck starts to move. What once felt confusing starts organizing itself. They're feeling this shift too, even if they don't consciously understand why. Your energy no longer reaches them as need, it reaches them as presence, and even in your absence, it speaks as a calm strength that can't be manipulated or ignored. And that unsettles them far more deeply than any amount of pursuit ever could. Silence carries a different meaning now. It's no longer rejection. It's processing. It's a confrontation with themselves. Life is asking them to look inward, to face the patterns they've relied on to feel safe, avoidance, emotional distance, control. These strategies used to protect them. Now they isolate them instead. There are moments when they feel a strong urge to reach out, followed immediately by moments of hesitation. This push and pull isn't really about you. It's about them standing right at the edge of their own growth. Stepping forward means risking real vulnerability. Staying back means quietly losing something real. Choices that were delayed out of fear. None of that simply disappears on its own. It waits for courage. Jung once said that wherever your fear lives, that's exactly where your task lives too. Right now, fear is standing in front of both of you, quietly asking to finally be acknowledged. Yours was learning to trust your intuition without losing yourself in the process. Theirs is learning to open their heart without hiding from it. Both of these tasks are unfolding slowly, in their own time. You might also notice that the idea of reunion doesn't excite you in quite the same way it once did. And that's not because you stopped caring. It's because you now want real depth instead of fantasy. You're no longer willing to accept confusion dressed up as fate. You want clarity, presence, actual effort. And this new internal standard isn't pushing them away. It's actually calling them forward. This is exactly where a lot of people misunderstand soul-level connections. They assume these bonds are meant to be endured endlessly, that suffering itself is proof of depth. But real soul connections were never meant to trap you in pain. They exist to lead you back to yourself first, and then, if it's truly meant to happen, back into alignment with each other, in honesty. You're already stepping into that alignment. There may be moments ahead where communication opens up unexpectedly, a message that feels genuinely sincere, a conversation that carries more honesty than before, or simply an energetic shift where everything just feels lighter, clearer, less strained than it used to. Don't rush any of that. Let it unfold on its own. Real, authentic reconnection can't be forced or hurried along. And if fear rises in you, fear of being hurt again, fear of hoping again, let it be present without letting it take the wheel. Fear isn't a warning sign here. It's simply an old memory, a memory of past pain, not a prediction of what's actually coming. You're not the same person you were when this all started. You're stronger now, clearer, more grounded. You no longer need to prove your worth through endless patience. Your worth is already established through how much you've grown. Whether they meet you there or not is entirely their choice, but they'll feel the difference regardless. The universe responds to embodiment, not to longing, and you're embodying something new now: self-respect, emotional sovereignty, calm trust. These qualities genuinely shift timelines. They open doors that pure effort never could on its own. There's a quiet strength that begins to form the moment you no longer need outside reassurance to believe what you already feel. It's the strength of real inner alignment. You stop scanning the world around you for signs because something inside you has already settled. Not settled in resignation, but settled in trust. Trust that whatever is real will not stay hidden from truth forever. At this stage, the connection stops feeling like an open question. It starts feeling like a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They show you exactly where you stand. You can see now that this bond was never meant to be chased. It was meant to be met. And meeting only becomes possible once both people are standing fully in themselves. This is where real responsibility starts to wake up in them, not guilt responsibility for choices they didn't make, words they left unspoken, courage they kept delaying, and responsibility is the doorway to actual change. Jung said that we are not what happened to us, we are what we choose to become right now. You chose growth over fixation, integrity over chasing, self-respect over self-sacrifice. They're standing at the edge of that exact same choice now. It requires dismantling old identities, letting go of defenses that once felt necessary, admitting real vulnerability where control used to rule everything. What matters right now isn't speed, it's direction, and the direction is shifting. You may sense moments of energetic closeness even without any actual communication happening. Sudden warmth, a sense of calm instead of longing, a feeling of simply knowing rather than hoping. That's not imagination, that's resonance. When two people are aligned at a soul level, distance doesn't sever the connection, it only delays the expression of it. But that expression is coming, not as chaos, not as confusion, but as clarity. And when clarity finally arrives, it won't ask you to shrink yourself. You're no longer the version of yourself who would accept breadcrumbs dressed up as fate. You're no longer impressed by unrealized potential without any real action behind it. You now understand that love has to be lived, not just felt privately. This is exactly why everything has slowed down the way it has. Anything built before reaching this level of awareness would have collapsed under its own imbalance anyway. One heart open, one heart guarded, one ready, one still afraid. That kind of dynamic could only ever produce pain. What's being prepared now is different. If they come back, it will be with real intention, not curiosity, not loneliness, intention paired with accountability, with genuine presence, with a real willingness to meet you in the open space you now occupy. And if they don't come back, you won't be broken by it, because the greatest gift this whole connection gave you was never the promise of reunion. It was a return to yourself, a deeper self-trust, a clearer inner voice, a stronger emotional spine. You now know the difference between chemistry and true compatibility at a soul level. You know the difference between longing and alignment. You know the difference between waiting and honoring timing without betraying yourself along the way. This isn't the end of your story with love, it's the refinement of it. And whatever comes next will meet you exactly at the level you now stand. You might feel a quiet, confident calm rising up in you, a feeling that says, I'll be okay either way. That isn't detachment, that's wholeness. That's your soul no longer bargaining for love, but simply allowing it. Pay attention to how your life is expanding again. New clarity, new energy, new inspiration. That's not a distraction from the connection. It's proof that you're no longer stuck inside it. You're walking alongside it now, not carrying it on your back. That changes everything, because love that's actually meant for you doesn't require you to disappear, and love that's real will recognize you fully once you're standing as yourself. Something is preparing to resolve, not through force, but through honesty, not through urgency, but through genuine readiness. Stay open, stay rooted, stay discerning. The final unfolding is close. There's a moment when the soul stops asking what will happen because it finally understands why everything happened the way it did. This is that moment, not dramatic, not loud, just deeply settling. You feel it as a quiet certainty in your chest, a knowing that doesn't need reassurance, explanation, or outside signs to survive. You've crossed over from questioning into clarity. At this point, you're no longer clinging to a specific outcome. You're aligned with truth itself, and truth moves at its own rhythm. You can see now that the delays were never punishments. They were protection. If this connection had unfolded earlier, before either of you had been shaped by real growth, it would have collapsed under the weight of unhealed patterns. Love needs space to mature. Souls need time to become strong enough to actually hold what they recognize in each other. You're being taught how to stand without shrinking, how to love without losing yourself, how to trust your intuition without giving up your discernment. None of these lessons were optional, they were necessary. And now something has genuinely changed. You're no longer reaching for this person from a place of need. You're standing in your own center. That shift alone changes the entire energetic field between you, because love that's meant to last doesn't form through pursuit. It forms through resonance. They feel that resonance now more clearly than ever before. The fear that used to control them isn't nearly as convincing anymore. The old stories they told themselves to avoid vulnerability are starting to crack. Silence doesn't feel safe to them anymore. Distance doesn't feel protective anymore. It feels like loss instead. And loss has a way of awakening real courage, not the impulsive kind, but the honest kind. A realization is forming in them that a connection like this is genuinely rare, that you can't replace real depth with distraction, that what they felt with you wasn't just intensity, it was recognition. And recognition changes a person permanently. They might not express any of this perfectly at first. Growth is rarely polished. It's simply sincere. If they come back, it will be to stand fully in themselves, to meet you without any masks, to speak from a place that's finally been stripped of excuses. And if they hesitate a little longer than expected, that doesn't undo what's already set in motion. Seeds don't stop growing just because you can't see them yet. Roots form long before anything breaks through the surface. You're no longer waiting around for them to choose you. You're choosing yourself. And that choice is exactly what makes real reunion possible without imbalance. Jung once said that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making our own darkness conscious. Both of you have been doing exactly that, facing the shadows that used to dictate your behavior, bringing awareness into places where avoidance used to live. That kind of work can't be rushed, and it can't be faked. This is exactly why, if and when reunion happens, it's going to feel different, calmer, clearer, more grounded, driven not by fear of loss, but by a genuine desire for truth. You'll recognize it immediately, not just through words, but through energy. There will be real presence, consistency, effort that doesn't need to be demanded from anyone. You won't have to wonder where you stand. You'll simply feel it. And if life ends up choosing a different resolution altogether, you'll still stand whole. That's the ultimate sign of alignment, because the actual purpose of this connection was never to leave you empty. It was to awaken your capacity for depth, for truth, for self-respect. And that purpose has already been fulfilled, regardless of how the rest plays out. Whatever comes back to you now does so by choice, not by obligation. You're not being asked to wait blindly. You're being asked to trust what's already been built inside you, to trust that love aligned with your soul won't require you to abandon yourself, to trust that what's real doesn't vanish the moment you stop chasing it. You've stopped operating from scarcity or from the fear of loss. You're moving instead from a place of genuine self-worth. And that's exactly why things are finally starting to align in your favor. Real timing was never about the hands on a clock. It's about internal readiness, and that readiness has finally arrived. Notice the calm you feel when you imagine either outcome playing out. That calm is your confirmation. You no longer need this specific connection to feel whole. You're already whole on your own, and any relationship now either has to rise to meet you or step aside. That's real power. That's genuine balance. That's love stripped of fantasy. Whatever happens in the days ahead won't confuse you. It won't drain you. It won't make you smaller. It will be rooted in truth, and truth is the highest form love can take. If these words reached you at exactly the right moment, trust that your own inner voice already holds the answer to the question sitting in the back of your mind. Is this the time to let go, or the time to keep believing? Only one of those options carries the feeling of real peace. Only one feels grounded in reality. Only one feels genuinely true. Sit with that and trust whatever answer rises up quietly on its own.